State Representative Carrie Wood, and I am a co-chair of this. Do we have any other remarks from the chairs?
No.
Point number 2 on the agenda. We are doing remarks. I would like to stay on remarks for one moment. We are very excited to have Wyatt Bosworth, a former member, move on to as manager of public policy for Amazon. And in his place, we have Chris Davis from CBIA. And I wanted to welcome Chris and make sure everyone on the committee was okay with that replacement. Any questions? Great. Moving on to point number 3, we're going to discuss our prior meetings and make some recommendations. And I would like to put this out to the group. What we can do is go through some of the items that was already presented to us. And I also just want to point out a few things that have not been presented to us and ask the group some questions regarding that. We have not heard from the Office of Behavioral Health Advocate. I believe that has not been appointed yet, or do you have any update on that?
I understand that they were recruiting for the position, but I don't know if it has been filled at this time.
Okay. We also have not heard from the Department of Public Health regarding their public health fund. We also haven't heard from the Department of Administrative Services, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, the Fall Prevention Program, and the Department of Housing. And I wanted to ask the committee how you would like to proceed, whether you thought we could do some questions from the group to those agencies and get those back for a future meeting, or would you like to have in-person presentations?
I actually think it's a good idea to present some questions to each of the agencies. I think that might be the most efficient way to get the information. So, and we're certainly willing to work with the others here on the committee to help put those questions together.
Anyone else?
Given the time frame, and we're already in November, it's probably the most efficient. I agree with Jane.
Okay. Sue?
I concur as well. I think we heard from the agencies that have, the predominant function within the insurance fund. I think there are probably some good questions we can ask, and just as we're having this conversation, allow that they be included in the record going forward, so that those that follow us have a good understanding of each of these agencies and how they fit into the insurance fund, and then can make the decisions from there. So I would be happy to work with you on questions to be posed to those agencies for answer. But agree with Eric in terms of the compressed time period between now and the beginning of session with holidays included. It probably is behooves us all to move in that direction.
Okay, I would ask everyone on the committee to submit to myself, Taylor, or Allie. We'll all get them. It doesn't matter where you send them to, but we will compile a list of the questions from members of the committee, and then we will send them to the agencies that we have not heard from yet. And we will also put in there a date that we'd like those responses back, and we'll review that at the next meeting, which hopefully will be, maybe what we'll do is we'll get those questions out prior to the next meeting, which would probably be our last one, where we make our final recommendations. Does that sound good? Okay, let's move on to other points under number 3 here. We did hear from OLR, OHS, DPH, OPM, and are there any recommendations or thoughts on any of the testimony that we've heard from to date? Yes, Senator Austin.
Thank you. So I think that this is another area where we have the information that before the next meeting, we send out a list of recommendations to everybody so that we can actually think about it. And we could send it all to Allie and Taylor, and they can compile a list of potential recommendations moving forward. I think that makes the most sense, so that we're all on the same page with potential recommendations from the working group and their assessment of all of the information that we have gotten.
Great.
Thank you. Jane?
Just another thought, that to the extent there's any outstanding questions for those agencies, maybe we can put those into the group of questions that we're planning to prepare for the others, just to make sure that we, tie up any loose ends that there may be.
Any other recommendations, initial recommendations or thoughts on information that we've received to date? Sue?
Thank you. And I actually meant to go back through all of these reports that you have listed here to confirm it either is or is not included. I'm guessing it is included at some point, and I can certainly include it in some of our recommendations to make sure it becomes part of the record if it isn't. But I just want to make sure that somewhere in our recommendations or report, or however we're going to consolidate all this going forward, that we make some reference to the OFA note on the file copy that preceded passage of Special Act 2415 that just indicates the financial impact of what the result would be if only health carriers were included in the assessments moving forward. And I'll be glad to pull that out and summarize it for discussion going forward.
Sue,
Does that make sense?
if you could do that and please present it to Taylor and Ally, that would be great for us to circulate amongst the members.
Happy to.
Eric?
So I think that the information that we've received throughout our work has led me to the conclusion that the insurance fund should be brought to where it used to be, what it should have been from the beginning, which is to pay for the operations of the insurance department. And that if we are ever going to get to that point of intellectual honesty, now is the time to do it. So with that, it would be a recommendation that I have that expenditures that are not related to the insurance fund be borne by the general fund. I think that that is the most intellectually honest way to pay for those agencies and those programs. The property and casualty and life insurers are absolutely supportive of funding the insurance department 100%, absolutely. Short of having all of those programs and agencies borne by the general fund, it is our position that on the Office of Health Advocate and the Office of Health Strategies, that given that there's no nexus between the work of those agencies and the property and casualty and life insurance industries, that they not be assessed for their operations.
Thank you, Eric. Can you just let us know the membership of the groups that you represent? There's property and casualty. There's life. Are there
So-
any others that we should be?
Thank you for saying that. That is the lion's share of the IAC's membership. We represent companies that provide supplemental health insurance, be it dental or vision, as well as long-term care insurance and disability income. All of those to varying degrees fall under the definition of healthcare, but I also understand that we've learned in other meetings that as assessments are placed on companies, whether or not they attach to those companies is unclear. One thing that I know that we asked for, and I think Sue asked for this, is and I think it was asked of OPM, is a more precise explanation of which companies pay what assessments. Because it is something that a lot of us who deal with this on a rather in-depth basis, we struggle with. So that would be important to know. But the IAC's membership is predominantly P&C and life, but we have certain supplemental and other LTC DI representation and group benefits, paid family medical leave and such.
Thank you, Eric. I wanted to just follow up on your question. So when you're talking to your members, as a whole, you don't know what companies are being assessed and how it is being billed. But if you ask them individually, would they be able to answer that?
have asked those questions, and many of them have provided me with the actual invoice, for lack of a better term, the assessment that they received from the department, and it does break it down. I have not heard from all of my companies, though.
Okay, so you're saying you,
Just to be clear, this impacts domestic insurers.
okay, so you're saying that you would like OPM to provide a more detailed information on how those or is it the Department of Insurance?
It's, I believe it's us. It would be the insurance department. Yeah. Yeah, it would be the insurance department that would be able to provide that breakdown. Yep. Okay. We can work on that.
So we will have that prior to the next meeting then that
Yeah.
we can circulate amongst the members. I think that would be very helpful. I just want to follow up on some of the comments too. This is new to me to learn about the insurance fund, and I've been happy to be part of this group and learning with everybody here. What concerns me about us not taking, what this fund is very seriously at this moment in time is that what happens during a recession, what happens during the next, economic downturn, and we're trying to pay for services of state government. I don't want this fund to continue to grow. It actually worries me when you look at the budget that was presented to us, what the 2025, projected budget is. I'm, up here as a legislator to work on the affordability issue in Connecticut. And I cannot tell you how many emails I have received over the past 6 months asking if we have passed a bill to increase home and auto insurance because the increases have been drastic. And looking at this fund, we're a part of that. So I, as a fiscally conservative legislator, just want to make sure that taxpayer or policyholder money is giving the best return on investment to the policyholders that are paying for it. And so I hope, over the next few weeks as we come up with questions and recommendations that we keep that in the back of our head going forward. Senator Austin?
So I just want to be careful that we're not saying it's one issue and one issue only. For example, homeowners policies are impacted certainly by the national impact that's happening as a result of the number of different storms that we have had and the number of different things that are going on in other communities that insurance policies are looking at and saying, not only is this going to happen in Florida or South Carolina or the fires that are happening on the western part of the state, this is happening sort of more broad-based. And we are a piece and a puzzle that is complicated. So I want to make sure that when we're looking at this, and I don't want to add a lot more things onto the insurance fund either, but we have, for example, the crumbling concrete issue that's happened. And that's the most recent issue that has happened. And we've actually, we would have lost the entire housing market, breaking the backs of those municipalities had we not done something. So I think that there has to be an understanding on what we're trying to do. The CIFSIC board, of which I am an ex officio member and have been, because the first people to come talked in front of Planning and Development where I was a chair and back then. And I think that we have to really pay attention to this, the problems that we had in Hartford with flooding. These are things that are impacting insurance policies that Eric represents right now. So I think we have to pay attention to this and look at it globally. It's the same thing with health insurance. Health insurance is a huge problem. But when we make a change, are we putting it on the backs of just a few policyholders and not broadly on every policyholder. So when we're making a change, should we understand that the change that is being made is going against just the small market insurance policies that we have? Is it impacting those that are really more federally governed? I think that we have to really sort of understand the whole gamut of what we are. And certainly, Representative Walker and I wanted to do this in this working group. We really wanted to do this working group in part because many of the other groups, like the Healthcare Strategy Group, wanted to double in size from where they are today. And all of that would have been paid for out of the insurance fund. And should we do that is a question that we were saying. These are the things that we have to pay attention to. Is it right for vaccines to be paid for so that people will actually get them? That may have a good public benefit. But these are the discussions that I think that this group needs to grapple with, as we do this. And we certainly are going to see changes on the federal level. And so when those changes happen, are we going to take on as a state? And I'm not suggesting we are. So when whoever is listening in is not going to print, Senator Austin is saying that we take on all of the losses that we will experience relative to federal funding. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is we should recognize where we are, recognize the possible complications of where we are, and pay attention to it so that when we're talking about recessions and other things that happen, that's why we are here today. Because when the recession happened, we input a number of things that were no longer going to be funded by the general fund budget. I agree with Eric. If we're going to add things on, we should be honest about where they are and fund them the way they were intended to be funded, not on the different insurance policies, whatever they are, cars or life or property or health, any one of those. So I think we have to just pay attention to the whole group of things. And Representative Walker and I have been very concerned about the increased asks from the different groups that are, or the different agencies and the pieces and parts of those agencies that are being funded out of this. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at this through the clear lens of how we got here and how do we untangle that web, because it's not linear. It's got a number of different components to that. So and I just wanted to make sure that we were not going to just look at one piece, but we were going to look at the number of pieces. And if we're making recommendations, which I suggest we do, that those suggestions aren't simplified because this is a complicated issue. And I want to make sure that we're looking at all of those complications that may result. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Kara? Representative Pavlik Tomato?
Thank you. I understand what the good senator is saying, and I agree and I guess either disagree or would ask one of the insurance representatives here. I mean, my understanding is insurance is different pools of people. So my understanding is the factors that would change rates are various things that impact or that are part of like those pools of people, whether they are mandates that we do or let's say stolen cars in Connecticut and the lack of accountability for that. But, I lived in Florida and I don't think the wind insurance, we don't have the same hurricane insurance and wind that we did in Florida. So I don't know that the hurricanes down there impact the pools of people up here. Well, that was my question actually for them. will that impact the hurricane down there as far as the property insurance up here? And then I guess my question would be, car insurance rates have skyrocketed too. So then where's that coming from? But I know every time we say up here, well, that's a mandate. Well, that's going to affect insurance rates. We say it on the floor all the time, and we might as well be talking to ourselves on the floor. And most of the times we are, because everybody leaves the room, but then it's still voted through, or it's put in a bigger bill. So I don't know what else to do at this point, because we're pretty much a broken record. And when we do assert that and say that, it falls on deaf ears. So I'm wondering if some of the insurance professionals could clarify
Good.
as far as what affects and what impacts, and kind of some details on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Kara Pavlik-Tomato. So you mentioned auto and you mentioned home. What goes into the premiums for those two types of insurance? We first have to look at what do those types of insurance pay for? What are the cost components? So if we look at the major drivers, inflation has been a huge one. So the cost of product, the cost of labor, everything associated with the supply chain has impacted the cost of health, or pardon me, the cost of home and auto insurance. What also is impacting it? Well, on our side, and I can't speak for the health insurers, litigation costs have been hugely impactful on the cost of home and auto insurance. When it comes to auto, the cars that we are driving and the cars that we are purchasing are becoming more expensive with more technology. All of that is raising the cost and the repairs, so that is an impact. Used cars are retaining their value at a rate that we have never seen, so that is also impacting. And then on home, Senator Austin is correct in what you were saying. Increased severe weather events have absolutely impacted how home insurance is rated and priced. And even in Connecticut, where we might not suffer from the same types of hurricanes that they do in Florida and other parts of the Gulf Coast and the East Coast, we have one of the highest percentages and densities of tree canopy. So the impact that has to dwellings, to roofs, is extremely considerable, and it's something that is a factor. So insurance absolutely is about spreading the cost and the risk. But if you look at what the breakdown is for home and auto, those are the major components. So I hope that's helpful. I can obviously talk to you more here offline, however you want to do that, Representative Pavlik-Tomato.
If I may, can you explain the tree canopy just quickly?
Sure. We're one of the greenest states, meaning that if you look at the size of Connecticut comparatively to other states, our canopy, the tree tops, if you will, is a greater percentage. And so that impacts dwellings more in Connecticut than it does in other states, especially when you have weather events like wind, hail, snow that happens perhaps too early in a season when leaves have not fully fallen off. That's what I mean. That's tree canopy.
Falling?
Tree canopy, we have deciduous trees. Deciduous trees that are huge. Our oaks, our maples are absolutely enormous. And when they fall, they cause a lot of property damage.
And I'm not going to go down this road specifically, but I'm glad you brought that up, because I know it's something that many people I know have brought up prior. So I'd like to discuss that with you further, and we can probably do that another day. So thank you.
Sue Halpin?
Thank you. First, I want to echo a lot of what's already been said today. Excuse me, and particularly around some of the recommendations. I think we have more of a common unified thread than we do a divergent thread in terms of recommendations here. And in terms of Representative Pavlik-Tomato's question, I think we view the insurance fund assessments as an administrative mandate in the context that your question posed. It's not the same as some of the benefit mandates and other requirements that have been placed on health insurers throughout the last several years, but it is an administrative mandate. And one like the IAC we embrace in terms of the roles, functions, responsibilities, and operations of the Department of Insurance. We have questions about some of the other pieces of that, we've posed in this forum. One of the things I've stressed, I think, since the beginning of this conversation, and that I want to make sure that we all don't lose sight of going forward, is the insurance fund is comprised of 3 different formulas, 3 different assessments. The majority of which, the formula that we focused most on in this conversation has been that agency component that includes the Department of Insurance first and foremost, the Office of Health Strategy, the Office of the Healthcare Advocate, the Office of the Behavioral Advocate, the funding for the crumbling foundations, and some of the other proposals. There is also the immunization fund, otherwise known as the health and welfare fee, which has a second formula attached to it. And I think OPM gave us a very good explanation and reconciliation around that process. And then the third is something that is unique to the health insurers, and that is the public health fee. And that is those programs and services that Senator Austin referred to, that during deficit years in the past, they were kind of lifted and shifted from the general fund to the insurance fund. I'm sorry, oh, no, that's okay. And that's, I think, for the health insurers in particular, a priority issue that may not be felt across the rest of the table here, because it is specific just to health insurers and really squarely falls in that administrative mandate category. It's not a huge amount of money, but it is significant in terms of philosophy and future liability and responsibility of the health plans. And then the last point I would just add, again, in response to Representative Pavlock D'Amato's question, is the fully insured business is the one that is subject to these assessments in their variety of forms. The 2 particularly in question that we're talking about here today. And those are a dwindling number of folks out of the 3.5 million. I often say 200,000, but that's the small group and the individual market, which are the least able to absorb the impact of any new mandates. If you extend that to the fully insured large group, it's upwards about 400,000 out of 3.5 million. But just to put a finer point on your question, those are the folks that are predominantly impacted by these assessments and this conversation, which is why we're very grateful that this conversation is being had today. And want to thank, all of the legislators here at the table and those that aren't, that advocated for this discussion, because it's probably something that is overdue. And I think getting much of this on the record for posterity is going to be important going forward. So thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. And although I'm a new member to the committee or the working group, I have been following it closely and have kept up with what has been discussed and presented so far. And from the perspective of employers, affordability is the #1 issue for them and for their employees, most importantly. And we see that through our annual survey of businesses just this year. That was the #1 issue that they want our legislature to take up next year, is trying to make healthcare more affordable. And that's from small business all the way up to large businesses. And we hear from earlier presentations for this working group that, the assessments could add thousands of dollars to a family of 4 for their health insurance costs each year. I mean, that's real money that can really go to work for them in the economy if it wasn't on these assessments, and it could save them and be a direct lowering of costs for them if those assessments weren't placed upon them. It's one of the rare ways that we can have that direct result of affordability by either lessening these assessments or removing them entirely. And I think the public is paying more attention to these types of funds. We saw that over this summer with the public benefits charge on the energy bills, right? Very, very similar to the scenario that we have on these assessments for both property casualty and health insurance, that, you know, a lot of these programs have been shifted. And in my prior life, I was part of those discussions about shifting money around from the general fund to the insurance fund and other funds. And I understand the difficult decisions that are made to do that. But if we are really going to tackle affordability, I think assessments on both property casualty, because employers pay a lot towards property casualty insurance as well, and health insurance is something that we really need to tackle. That's why we're so thankful to not only be part of this panel, but also that the working group was created in the first place to really kind of shine a light on what's going on in the insurance fund and how, or to come up with ways what's the best way to fund many of these great programs that are, whether it's vaccines or different screenings that are paid for through this, but is the insurance assessment the proper way to do it? Or is it truly shifting them back into the general fund where they originally were funded from, the best route forward for Connecticut's employers, Connecticut's families, and ultimately all of our residents across the state. So I think that's a lens that we need to have when we're making these recommendations over the next month of how do we do it in a way that is the most affordable way that still serves its purpose. We still can do these programs that we're funding out of here, but what the funding source is the most proper one to make it most affordable for Connecticut's businesses and residents.
Thank you, Chris. I want to ask a clarifying question to the department, if you don't mind, just because we did hear Sue say a lot of these assessments were on the fully insured. The immunization fund, that is both fully and self-insured, correct? And TPAs?
That's right.
And you're going to get the information to us to kind of, for us to drill down into that
We will.
further? Okay, I just want to make sure that we are getting that, because I know that's a question that we're even talking about now, just in our loose discussion. So with all of these wonderful comments, it is now up to us to make sure we have all the information we need and to start putting forward recommendations that we will summarize and finalize at our final meeting. Do we want to look at a date for that? Considering the holidays, would the second week in December be the best, earlier in the week? That's 8th. That's the 9th is Monday, 10th is Tuesday, 11th is Wednesday. Any of those dates work? Okay. Anyone have a preference or conflict? So why don't we do Tuesday, the 10th? Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Hold on. Yep. Would Monday, the 9th work?
Monday works better for me.
Okay, why don't we do Monday, the 9th, 10 or 11? 10. Monday, the 9th at 10 a.m. Okay. All right, so that will be our next meeting. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
A second? All those in favor? Thank you, everyone.